Pack your awards because you're transitioning to retirement. Effective immediately. The words hit the room like a bomb going off. 140 faces turned toward me in dead silence. Ashley Hawthorne smiled into the microphone like she'd just announced the weather forecast, not my career execution. I stood there holding a crystal plaque with my name spelled wrong, Nathan Richard for keeping us compliant, watching 9 years of keeping Pinnacle Defense Systems alive collapse in real time. And the worst part? She had absolutely no idea what she'd just done to the company. Look, I'm Nate Richards, 48 years old, and before I explain how a lifestyle influencer accidentally triggered a federal investigation that would make grown executives weep into their $3,000 laptops, let me back up and tell you how we got here. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about being the guy who keeps a defense contractor from getting hammered by federal regulators. You become invisible until something breaks. I spent 9 years catching filing errors before they turned into congressional hearings. 9 years translating government speak at 2 a.m. while everyone else was updating their LinkedIn profiles. I kept this place from burning down more times than I could count. My background? 20 years in the Air Force, logistics officer, 3 tours overseas. I know what real leadership looks like, and I know what happens when chain of command gets ignored. What happened at that Colorado Springs retreat wasn't leadership, it was a public execution disguised as corporate strategy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the expense report that started this whole mess. Last month, Ashley Hawthorne, that's Justin Hawthorne's wife, and Justin's the CEO's 29-year-old son, wanted to bill a $20,400 executive lifestyle brunch to the corporate card, called it team building. I looked at the invoice. Influencer event, premium catering, professional photography, social media consultant fees. The works. Now, I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I've seen what federal auditors do to companies that can't explain their expenses. So I quietly rerouted it to her husband's personal account with a polite note about proper business classification. Figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. Ashley had been floating around Pinnacle corporate events for 2 years, using her husband's position like a backstage pass to every boardroom she could Instagram. Her background? Event coordination in Scottsdale. That's it. No regulatory training, no compliance certification, no understanding that the federal risk management system doesn't care about your husband's MBA or your social media following. But there she was at this executive summit, supposed to celebrate our operational heroes, their words, not mine. All 140 of us were invited to this resort outside Vail. Naturally, nobody ever asked me to help plan it. That's ironic since every time they screwed up the logistics, they came running to me to fix it. I found the missing vendor contracts. I made sure our liability coverage matched the venue requirements. I even corrected the resort's safety documentation because HR didn't notice half the conference rooms weren't up to fire code. But I wasn't the face of the company. I wasn't the shiny new analytics platform they were demoing. I was the guy with the corner office near legal who carried a thick regulatory binder everywhere and always had backup documentation in his briefcase. The kind of guy who got work done while others scheduled brainstorming sessions to discuss scheduling work. Still, I showed up. I even wore the Air Force dress blues that didn't make me look like I moonlighted at the DMV. When the awards ceremony started that Friday evening, I nursed a bourbon and tuned out the parade of buzzwords echoing off the resort walls. Disruptor of the year, client whisperer, synergy architect. Good grief. Then they called my name. The room dimmed. A spotlight flickered on. Justin Hawthorne stepped up with a tablet and read from it like the words physically hurt him. This next award goes to someone who keeps our operational engine running smoothly behind the scenes. I'd heard variations of this speech for years. Something about being the backbone, the unsung hero, the steady hand. They praise you with metaphors that sound noble until you realize what they really mean is we forget he exists until something breaks. Still, I stood to accept the crystal plaque with a nod and a half smile. That's when Ashley grabbed the microphone. She wasn't even on the agenda, but she marched up in her sequined dress like she was hosting the Oscars. She yanked the mic from Justin and smiled wide enough to show her veneers. "Let's give it up for Nate, everyone," she announced. The 140 faces in the room turned toward me, expecting the usual thank you speech. Then she paused for dramatic effect. "Between you and me, I should have seen it coming. The way she'd been looking at me all evening, like she was waiting for her moment. This wasn't a drunken mistake or an awkward joke that missed the mark. This was calculated revenge for that expense report, wrapped in corporate theater. And that's when she dropped the bomb. The clapping stopped. I mean, it stopped like someone cut the power to the building. A glass hit the floor somewhere near the back. Justin blinked like he'd been slapped. CEO Richard Hawthorne gave that half smirk you see when someone else gets pranked on a video call. HR's face went into full blue screen mode. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what she meant or how she knew something I didn't. In the Air Force, you learn to read situations fast. This was deliberate. Ashley had been planning this moment probably since that expense report incident. I just nodded once, placed the award gently back on the table, turned around, and walked out of the main resort. No door slam, no dramatic exit speech. I simply walked down the icy wooden steps to my guest cabin, packed my overnight bag, and drove back down the mountain through the sleet in complete silence. That was Friday at 5:30 p.m. What Ashley didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she'd just started a 72-hour countdown to corporate catastrophe. Here's what Ashley didn't understand about my job, and what Justin was too weak to explain to her. My federal risk management certification wasn't just some line on my resume or fancy title on a business card. It was the digital foundation that held up every government contract, every regulatory filing, every piece of federal paperwork that kept Pinnacle Defense Systems in business. Think of it like this: remove the keystone from an arch, and the whole thing collapses. That's exactly what she'd just done, except she was probably at home posting Instagram stories about making tough leadership decisions while the countdown timer started ticking. During the drive home through the snow, I ran through every possible angle in my head. My certification was like a digital seal on every piece of federal paperwork we processed. Remove the seal, and everything becomes invalid. The system gives you exactly 72 hours to restore active certification before automatic compliance violations trigger. It's designed that way to prevent gaps in oversight. Ashley had just started a 72-hour countdown to corporate catastrophe, and she had no idea. At home, I didn't even take off my coat. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. My phone buzzed once. A text from Danny Williams in procurement asking if I was okay. Then nothing. Not HR, not legal, not even a follow-up from Danny. Look, I've been through enough military operations to know when to wait and when to act. This was definitely a waiting situation. So I cracked open a beer and watched the digital clock on my cable box tick toward the inevitable. Around 1:30 a.m., I logged into the Pinnacle internal portal and watched the risk management dashboard load. My credentials were still active for now. I could still see all the compliance filings, still had clearance for regulatory documents, but I knew that would change faster than Ashley could say lifestyle brand. Saturday morning came gray and cold. I sat by the kitchen window in my old Chiefs sweatshirt, drinking coffee and waiting for the first domino to fall. At 8:15 a.m. it did. Email notification, certification status update, Pinnacle Defense Systems. My federal risk management certification had been flagged as under review due to employment status change. The countdown had officially started. From here, it was just basic math and federal bureaucracy doing what federal bureaucracy does best, following procedures to the letter. Saturday afternoon brought the second email. Certification status update. Pinnacle Defense System status changed to inactive pending verification. That meant any documents processed under my authority after Friday 5:30 p.m. were now flagged for review. I logged back into the Pinnacle portal and watched my access gray out section by section. First the personnel directory, then the secure filing system, then the federal database. Like watching your security clearance evaporate in real time. But here's what I noticed, and this is where it gets interesting. The automatic processing system was still running like nothing had happened. See, Pinnacle had 3 federal filings scheduled for weekend submission. Standard quarterly reports that always processed Saturday morning at 6:30 a.m. sharp. The system was using my cached digital signature, not realizing my certification was already flagged. 3 documents submitted Saturday morning under an inactive certification, each one a potential federal violation. I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen. Amateur hour, I said to my coffee mug. Sunday brought more automated chaos. The compliance system tried to process 3 additional emergency filings, something about a new government contract that couldn't wait until Monday. Again, my cached signature. Again, under an inactive certification. 6 total documents now, all federally invalid, all carrying my digital signature without my authorization or active certification backing them up. Between you and me, watching a multi-million-dollar defense contractor accidentally commit federal compliance violations because they fired their risk officer without understanding what he actually did? That's the kind of irony you can't write in a movie script. Nobody would believe it. By Sunday evening, I'd received the final automated email. Certification status, Pinnacle Defense Systems, inactive. My name had been completely removed from the federal registry. Any Pinnacle document bearing my signature was now legally worthless. Worse than worthless, actually. It was evidence of systematic compliance failure. I closed the laptop and whispered to my empty living room, 72 hours exactly. Monday morning was 18 hours away. That's when someone at Pinnacle would try to submit their weekly compliance summary and discover that their entire federal framework had collapsed like a house of cards. That's when Patricia Williams, senior federal compliance auditor, would start asking very pointed questions about who authorized weekend filings without proper certification. Patricia Williams wasn't someone you ignored. She was the kind of federal auditor who could shut down operations with a single phone call and sleep soundly that night. I'd worked with her on 3 previous audits. Professional, thorough, and absolutely zero tolerance for compliance gaps. Here's the thing about federal oversight. It's designed by people who understand that national security contracts can't have loose ends. When you're dealing with defense systems, missile guidance software, and classified communications equipment, there's no such thing as close enough or we'll fix it later. Ashley had just thrown a wrench into a system designed to prevent exactly this kind of chaos. I poured another cup of coffee, opened my crossword puzzle book, and waited for my phone to ring. The federal government runs on procedures, timelines, and consequences. In about 16 hours, all 3 were going to converge on Pinnacle Defense Systems like a perfect storm. And somewhere in the Hawthorne household, Ashley was probably planning her next Instagram post about corporate leadership while her husband Justin tried to figure out why their general counsel kept sending increasingly frantic text messages about certification status and compliance violations. The best part? They still hadn't called me. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m., it started with an email that would make Pinnacle's general counsel spill coffee on his $3,000 laptop. Subject line, urgent, missing active certification on recent filings. Sender, Patricia Williams, senior federal compliance auditor. Let me tell you something about Patricia Williams. She's not someone who sends emails for entertainment. She's the kind of federal auditor who could shut down operations with a single phone call and sleep soundly that night. I'd worked with her on 3 previous audits, professional, thorough, and absolutely zero tolerance for compliance gaps. The email body was surgical in its precision. We reviewed last week's end-of-quarter submissions and weekend emergency filings. As of Friday, 5:30 p.m., no active credential is listed for your internal risk officer on federal record. 6 documents submitted Saturday through Sunday require immediate clarification of signatory authority. Please provide certification status within 4 business hours or expect automatic compliance review. Translation: you filed federal documents with an inactive officer's signature. That's not a paperwork error. That's potential fraud, misrepresentation, and violation of federal oversight requirements. The kind of thing that triggers congressional hearings and makes CEOs testify under oath. By 9:15 a.m., Pinnacle's general counsel was in full panic mode. He'd pulled up the federal compliance portal and stared at the screen like it might change if he blinked hard enough. There it was, big and bold, active license holder, none on file. It had been exactly 72 hours since my name vanished from the registry. Not transferred, not replaced, just gone. And in that window, Pinnacle had submitted 6 federal documents under my cached signature without any active certification backing them up. Every contract signed, every disclosure filed, every regulatory form processed in that 72-hour window was now legally invalid. Worse than worthless, it was evidence of systematic compliance failure. By 9:45 a.m., someone from HR was having what sounded like a nervous breakdown in a Slack channel labeled Emergency Situation Urgent. The messages were flying. Does anyone have Nate's phone number? Who authorized weekend filings? Did Nate actually resign or not? Here's what I love about corporate panic. It reveals exactly who's been paying attention and who's been coasting. Suddenly, everyone remembered that the quiet guy with the regulatory binder might have been important after all. By 10:02 a.m., every executive who had pretended not to see me leave the resort 3 nights earlier received the same calendar invite. Emergency Federal Compliance Review. Mandatory attendance. Location: Executive Boardroom, 12th floor. Time: 10:30 a.m. Required: CEO Richard Hawthorne, CFO, COO, VP Operations, VP Legal, General Counsel, HR Director, Justin Hawthorne. The required list read like a federal grand jury summons. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Hawthorne household, while Justin poured cold brew into a monogrammed tumbler, he probably told his wife, "Relax, it's just paperwork. Legal's always freaking out about something." But Ashley was too busy that morning to worry about corporate compliance. She was posting a filtered selfie from the retreat with the caption, "Sometimes leadership means making the hard calls still glowing from this amazing weekend. #executive wife, #tough choices, #moving forward." She had no idea she'd just become the star of a federal compliance investigation. Back at Pinnacle, the general counsel prepped the boardroom like he was hosting a war tribunal. He printed Patricia Williams' email, highlighted every critical phrase in yellow, and projected it on the massive screen behind the conference table. Below that, he pulled up the federal compliance portal showing our certification status in all its devastating clarity. The numbers were damning: 72 hours of non-compliance, 6 invalid federal documents, 0 active certification backing, 1 very angry federal auditor with the authority to recommend criminal referrals. Justin sauntered in at 10:25 a.m., still chewing a protein bar, apparently unaware that his wife had just triggered the corporate equivalent of a nuclear meltdown. "So, is this about the compliance stuff? Because if it's about Nate again..." The general counsel turned slowly, face pale as accounting paper. Nate was our only certified federal risk officer. His credential was linked to every single piece of government documentation we process. Without him, every federal filing we've submitted since Friday is legally invalid. Justin shrugged with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced actual consequences. "Can't we just have someone else sign the forms?" "You can't backdate federal compliance," the general counsel said, voice cracking slightly. "This isn't a vacation request form. We're talking about potential criminal referrals for misrepresentation of federal documents." Between you and me, watching Justin's face as reality penetrated his privileged bubble was probably worth the price of admission. The cocky confidence faded, replaced by something that looked like actual fear. He looked like someone slowly realizing the house party he just hosted might have burned down the entire neighborhood. CEO Richard Hawthorne pinched the bridge of his nose like he was trying to squeeze sense into his skull. Who the hell authorized weekend submissions without verification? Everyone looked at each other with the collective expression of passengers who'd just realized their pilot had passed out mid-flight. Then someone whispered, "The system used Nate's automatic signature protocol." The screen flashed as the general counsel clicked through the weekend filings. There they were, 6 documents, all bearing my digital signature, all time-stamped after my certification went inactive. Ghost signatures on loaded legal documents. Saturday, 6:30 a.m., 3 quarterly compliance reports. Sunday, 11:45 a.m., 2 emergency contract amendments. Sunday, 4:15 p.m., 1 federal disclosure update. Each one a potential felony if Patricia Williams decided to refer this to the Department of Justice. "What's the worst-case scenario here?" Justin asked, voice barely above a whisper. The general counsel didn't answer immediately. He just stared at Patricia Williams' email signature block, which included her official title, Senior Federal Compliance Auditor, Criminal Referral Division. Then he pointed at one word that Patricia Williams had underlined twice in her email, sanctions. The room fell into funeral silence. Outside, Denver traffic hummed along normally, oblivious to the fact that a major defense contractor was hemorrhaging federal compliance in real time. Across town, I was finishing a crossword puzzle at my kitchen table, phone sitting silently beside my coffee mug. They still hadn't called, but they would. The beautiful thing about being indispensable is that you only discover it when someone tries to dispose of you. At 2:20 p.m. Monday, my phone finally rang, not from HR, not legal, not even Justin, who I assumed was currently locked in a supply closet, hyperventilating into a branded Pinnacle paper bag. It was the COO, Margaret Stone, a woman who once described risk management as that background stuff so we don't get audited. Her tone today? Barely controlled panic wrapped in corporate speak. "Nate, Hi, listen, we'd love to discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity, just to help us navigate this regulatory situation. They were hemorrhaging federal compliance and calling it a minor hiccup. I let the silence stretch. She rushed to fill it, just until we recalibrate our workflows and restore confidence with the auditors. Honestly, no one has more expertise in federal risk management than you. We'd compensate you generously, thinking $145,000 annually, which represents a 48% increase from your previous $98,000 salary. Is that what Ashley recommended, before or after she fired me over the cheese board? Nervous laugh. There was clearly a miscommunication at the retreat. Sure, I said, because usually when someone announces your retirement into a microphone in front of 140 people, they mean, "We appreciate your service." Margaret hesitated. The real issue is operational continuity. We need someone with your certification to... You need me, I cut in. Not a consultant, not a contractor. You need Nate Richards, Certified Federal Risk Management Officer, to rebuild the compliance framework that Ashley demolished for her Instagram moment. Here's what I learned in 20 years of military service. When you hold all the cards, you don't fold early. I told Margaret I'd consider it, hung up, and called Colonel George Rodriguez, my old mentor. Former Marine, 25 years in corporate risk management, now an independent consultant who specialized in federal compliance disasters. They want me back, I told him. Of course they do. They just watched their entire regulatory foundation collapse faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. What are you thinking? I opened my laptop and started typing. Terms and conditions for re-engagement. Full back pay retroactive to Friday 5:30 p.m. Security clearance immediately restored. New title, VP Government Relations and Compliance. Direct reporting to the board chairman, not the CEO. Authority over all federal compliance matters. And one more thing. A formal written apology from the company acknowledging the improper termination. Let them sweat until Wednesday, George advised. Patricia Williams won't do anything until Thursday anyway. Make them come to you. Wednesday afternoon, Pinnacle called again. This time, it was the board chairman himself. Richard Hawthorne had apparently been removed from negotiating duties after the board learned his daughter-in-law had triggered a federal investigation. Nate, we need to resolve this immediately. Patricia Williams is threatening to refer this to the Justice Department. We're prepared to meet your terms. All of them? All of them. VP Government Relations and Compliance, $155,000 annual salary. Board reporting, full restoration of authority, and yes, the written apology. Thursday, 3:15 p.m. I walked into Pinnacle HQ through the main entrance. The receptionist stood as I stepped off the elevator. They're waiting for you, Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards, not Nate, not hey compliance guy, but the formal respect that comes with being indispensable. The boardroom was packed. CEO, CFO, COO, General Counsel, Justin, HR Director, even 2 outside board members. And at the head of the table sat Patricia Williams, her federal binder open like a roadmap to corporate redemption. Let's begin, she said, and the room settled into respectful silence. She turned directly to a page flagged Remedial Compliance Resolution. Pinnacle Defense Systems has acknowledged a 72-hour gap in certified risk management oversight, resulting in 6 improperly authorized federal filings. The company has agreed to full remediation under Restored Officer Nathan Richards, effective immediately. She slid a document across the table. VP Government Relations. Nathan Richards will assume full federal compliance authority with direct board oversight. All prior filings will be resubmitted under proper certification within 30 days. Not consultant, not contractor. VP Government Relations. I looked at Justin, who was staring at his hands like they might contain an apology he'd never find the courage to speak. Then I looked at the empty chair where Ashley would have sat if she hadn't been permanently banned from Pinnacle corporate events. One question, I said. Who's going to explain to the board how a lifestyle influencer managed to trigger a federal investigation? Patricia Williams almost smiled. That's not my department, Mr. Richards. That's yours now. I signed the reinstatement documents, stood, and gathered my new executive folder. Next time someone wants to restructure, I said to the room, try asking the foundation before you demolish it for social media content. 6 months later, I was reviewing our Q3 compliance metrics when Danny Williams knocked on my new corner office door. You see Ashley's latest Instagram post? He asked with a grin. I glanced at his phone. There she was, promoting some MLM skincare line from her studio apartment in Phoenix. Caption read, New chapter, new opportunities. Building my empire one day at a time. Hashtag boss life. Hashtag entrepreneur. Hashtag independent. Woman, turns out the board had some thoughts about family members triggering federal investigations, Danny said. Word is they made it very clear to Richard that certain relatives needed to find new hobbies. Marriage didn't survive the career change. I handed back his phone and returned to my quarterly report. Through my window, I could see the celebration in the main conference room. Pinnacle's new government contract worth $127 million was being announced. None of those executives would forget who kept their federal credentials intact. Sometimes the system works exactly as designed, I said. Remove the weak links, strengthen the foundation. Ashley Hawthorne learned that influence without competence has a very short shelf life. Justin learned that enabling has consequences. And Richard Hawthorne learned that nepotism is expensive when it triggers federal investigations. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge really is just being indispensable. And occasionally, watching incompetence get exactly what it deserves. The beautiful thing about professional expertise is that it can't be faked, can't be bought, and definitely can't be replaced by Instagram followers.